What's up, nerds? I'm back, and today, it's about that time, you know. It's time we talk about my boy Reginald P. Electricity. Okay, he's kind of buns. If we're being honest, he's not what he once was. L plus ratio plus he fell off, and basically what I'm saying is, he's not worth it anymore. Poor guy, just doesn't have as much value. So I'm going to talk about why he's not worth going to anymore, what we see the meta shifting towards, and what changed. So first of all, starting with the claim of he's not what he used to be. Why he used to matter so much is because early points mattered a lot more than they do now. This was back when Rayquaza was a lot weaker. He had a lot more HP, and he gave less of a buff to damage and less shield than he does now. So this means that the early pressure and the points scored could have had massive impacts on the outcome of the game, where games were decided by often a lot less because Rayquaza was never killed. When Thea Sky Ruins came out, in my opinion, that was when Rayquaza was at its most balanced. And a lot of the games would end when nobody secures Rayquaza, and it comes down to whoever was able to score most effectively for the actual first 8 minutes of the game. And that, combined with the damage output that Regieleki used to have, made it super important for your team to secure and be able to push early game. So why he doesn't matter so much anymore is because Rayquaza got a huge buff. Rayquaza is so strong that points aren't really that important in the time leading up to the final stretch. Not to say overcaps don't matter. You should always be going for the biggest overcap you can. But that said, if you're able to get like, 40 points at some time and there's only 25 left, it's definitely worth it, right? 40 points is a big dunk, a lot of XP. If you're stacking, I would say get those stacks in, man. You're just trying to build up for the late game here. So the ray shields that you get now are so strong, you can just easily wipe what's left of a team after you get them most of the time. Not every time. Rayquaza's not a free win, but it is certainly a massive advantage for your team, obviously. The shield buff combined with the HP nerf means that one single Pokemon can rip Rayquaza in like 10 seconds or so. So I'm a Cinderace truther. I know nobody knew that. That's crazy. I bet you guys had no idea I like to play a lot of Cinderace. And if I see that my team has a 4v5, I'm ripping, dog. Like, I will smash that X attack, blaze kick in, and just B press and go to secure with my ult, right? Because you can rip it so fast. A lot of times before anybody's able to do anything. And they're really not able to get their team back into position to fight if they're down one, or even if you see somebody backcapping, just start ripping. It's pretty insane. Rayquaza is super strong. Backcaps don't matter so much anymore, and Regieleki doesn't matter so much anymore. So let's talk about what we should do instead of going to the Regielekis most of the time. So obviously the only other objectives, the bottom lane, okay? Basically, people were asking for a Dreadnought nerf because in a remote stadium, every single fight broke out at the Dreadnought, right? Because you got so much XP and shields from it, it could be a huge swing. Well, the Regis are, in a way, kind of a nerf Dreadnought. They give about half of the Dreadnought XP, plus a small buff depending on which Regi it is. So Regice has 5% healing of your max HP every 3 seconds, which is okay. It's not terrible. It got a buff, so it's not entirely worthless. Regirock is a little bit better. It gives a 30% defense buff and a 25% special defense buff. And Registeel is probably the best one. And by probably, I mean definitely. It's the most powerful. And it gives 15% to both your attack stats. So you get a 15% buff to your special attack and your attack. So you get a little bit of XP. And then these buffs also help you just steamroll the next fight. They last for 90 seconds. So almost up until the next objective spawns. So if you're able to secure, let's say, a Registeal, and then you take the next team fight, your team now has a 15% damage buff that the other team is playing without. So you should be able to just beat them, gain XP from defeating them, and then you're ready to go to the next objective fight after that. And if you lost the top Regi, you have a good chance of being able to defend from it because, like I said, he's not as strong as he used to be. They nerfed the damage output of it because, holy moly, it used to be insane. And you're usually fighting on your own pad. So you have some sort of buff, whether it's extra HP, extra defense, or extra attack stats. You're able to just defend it on your pad. It's not usually that big of a deal. And for that reason, it's better to just play through the bottom lane, but you don't want to entirely sacrifice your top lane if you don't have to, which is kind of the way it used to be, right? In a remote stadium. If you can leave 1 or 2 players to take a fight down at the bottom Regi, if it's going to be even, or maybe they don't send as many players, even they only have 1 down there, then you want to take the fight with as little as you can and take the advantage there and then go back up top. So, right, if you see the whole team is up at the Regieleki, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to engage 5v5. In that scenario, there's a little bit of nuance to it, right? You can maybe send 1 DPS down to the bottom to rip it, and everybody else goes up top to defend from the Regi, get ready to catch it, right? Because you don't want to take a 4v5 fight because you're just inherently a disadvantage. So if your jungler's down in the bottom lane ripping, you're going to wait for that buff, defend on pad, and then your jungler rotates up and you take a 5v5. And I'm assuming most people play solo queue, right? So if you're not the jungler and you're down there with them, you just leave if you see there's nobody else there. Or if your jungler's up top and you're playing some sort of DPS, then you go down and do the bottom Regi. But at the same time, if you're like a tank or support, you don't really have much of a choice. You kind of just have to go wherever your team's going to have the advantage. Because like I said, you don't want to give up an entire goal zone for nothing. Now, when is Regieleki worth it to push and go to secure? So if your opponents don't have a tier 1 or a tier 2 and it's early on, and you have ults, it's really, really good to go try to push it in. So especially if you're able to break the tier 1, let's say early game, you're able to secure the first Regi. You rotate up to take a fight at the Regieleki, and now you have that buff. If you secure that Regieleki and you have ults you're able to use, try to break the tier 1 and push it into tier 2 using your ults and see if you can just break it early on. This goes for really the 7 or the 5 minute mark if this happens to work out. Then you can get massive value out of Regieleki then. So it's not always worthless. I know I said it was pretty much always worthless. Pretty much, dog. Not always. Not always. Sometimes it can be really good to get those points in. And sometimes you just have to ignore the bottom Regis as well, which can be a little bit rough. If you're losing, sometimes you just have to concede the bottom Regis to avoid falling any farther behind. So if your opponent is sieging a tier 2 or a home pad with Regieleki, you can't sack your tier 2 or risk letting it in your home base for a bottom Regi, even just a chance at it. You can't do that. You have to take an advantage fight. If you see somebody down there ripping a Regi and it's not on your team, but they're pushing a Regieleki on you at the same time and you're behind, you have to defend from it. You can't just lose a tier 2 for nothing. Tier 1 is not so bad, especially if you're able to use the Regieleki itself to break. You're able to stall long enough where the Regi breaks. Usually it's not a very big overcap. That's not the worst, but you really can't let it go into tier 2, especially not home base. I don't know, this seems kind of obvious, but believe me, most people don't know that, including me. I'm the CEO doing the bottom Regi alone, thinking my team's going to play defensively. I go dunk my 20 points from securing the Regi, and then giving up 100 in our tier 2 because I'm a freaking dingleberry. So there's a little bit of nuance there, and it's very situational, but in general, you can't sacrifice your tier 2. And another time you have to ignore the bottom Regis is if it's the last, almost the final stretch, and your tier 2 is either gone or low, and they look like they're going to try to push the Regieleki. So what you can't risk is Regieleki going to home base, especially final stretch, right? Which is what we're trying to avoid here. If it looks like your tier 2, let's say, is on like 10 points, they're able to get a fast cap, and then it pushes towards your home base, you have to be able to stop that. That said, if your tier 2 is above 20 and there's a Regi sieging it towards the Rayquaza, you let it in every single time. You don't want to sit there, defend a Regi from your tier 2 while your team takes a 4v5. Like I said earlier, Rayquaza is so powerful right now, those points aren't going to matter as much. And now it's a point in the game where it's like you're not just giving anything up for nothing. You're giving it up for the chance to win Rayquaza, which is way more important. Whereas earlier in the game, if you give up a tier 2, it's kind of almost for nothing. So it puts you in a really bad spot. So if your opponent is not pushing the Regi and you can see that, you leave it immediately if you're just going to go into a tier 2. You don't care about that anymore. You have to go to Rayquaza. Rayquaza is super strong right now. And Regieleki is at the weakest it's ever been. He's looking a little bit like Rotom, dog. He's looking a little bit like Rotom. So for the most part, you want to run the game through the bottom lane, which I'm seeing a lot of people not do, which just made climbing for me super easy. I mean, I'm kind of the best season I've ever had, which is kind of woo. And I'm trying to share the knowledge, you know? So hope this helps. Hope it clears it up a little bit if you didn't know that. And I hope you smash that subscribe button, come out for more videos. Peace out.